What is up, everyone? Welcome to Mets Off Day Live, presented by Planet Fitness. Join Planet Fitness for $1 down, $24.99 a month. Deal ends June 27th. I'm Niki Lattarulo. Joining us on the show, John Jastremski and Jolly Olive. Guys, thanks for joining us.
Fired up, Nikki. Jolly, great to be with you. Subway Series time. Summer in the big city. Let's rock and roll. Let's go.
Yeah, yes, both New York teams playing good ball. Excited to be here.
Yes, we're going to start by going around the diamond, talking about the Mets right off the bat. They dominated the Cubs 11-1, game one of their series. Chicago got the revenge in game two, beating the Mets 8-1. So two very high-scoring games, but the Mets took the rubber game. And with that, the Mets have the best record in the month of June, which is something I don't think any of us thought we'd be saying. Jolly, I'm going to start with you. The number one question in all the Mets fans' minds is the Grimace Era still on?
The beautiful thing about the Mets fan base is that anytime we go on any sort of winning stretch, there's some sort of rallying cry that gets attached to it. Earlier in the year, we had the rally pimp. Now it's Grimace. I think if you're a fan and you believe in that magic, believe on, even if you think it might be over at this point. But the bottom line is that the Mets are playing better ball. They're showing that the roster is talented and was underperforming before. And whether you want to attribute that to a mascot or to the talent coming through, I'm fine with either way. It's just fun to be a Mets fan right now.
Yeah. I'm all in on the Grimace Era, Nikki. Jolly, why not? I mean, listen, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And since Grimace found his way to Citi Field to throw out a first pitch, you've gotten a different, far more inspiring brand of baseball out of the Mets. And yes, I don't think that Francisco Lindor and Brandon Nimmo getting hot is due to the purple guy in a suit throwing out the first pitch. But you know what? I'm a believer in juju and good karma and everything that comes with it. The Mets got it rolling from that standpoint. So why be a hater? Get on board, Grimace, baby.
I think, first of all, the City Connect jerseys match Grimace. So, I don't know if that was some foreshadowing. And maybe every time they're in a slump, they could just bring Grimace back and then maybe it'll get them going again. But in the final game of the series, it obviously had some controversy. Edwin Diaz got ejected before he took them out having excess sticky stuff. He'll serve a mandatory 10-game suspension. Jolly, I'll start with you. What's your thoughts on what happened there in the ninth inning? I know he didn't have a chance to wash his hands. People are saying it's controversial. Thoughts?
Yeah, it's tough because Mets fans, I think, have endured this more than any other fan base. We've had 7 suspensions for sticky stuff. 3 of them have been Mets pitchers. And it's kind of the same song and dance. If it isn't sweat and rosin, like umpire Vic Carpazza claimed, what is it? Because we're not really sure. Edwin Diaz isn't really sure. But in terms of the roster construction of the Mets, it's a tough blow. The bullpen's been stabilized. A big reason for that was Edwin Diaz's return and everyone's sliding down the depth chart. Now you find yourself not only shorthanded, but back in that square one problem of who's going to close games now? What is it going to look like? But on the other hand, if the Mets continue to mash the ball, and these save opportunities aren't coming because we're winning by so much, you can get through this 10-game stretch without Edwin Diaz. It just stinks because you saw how much confidence he was regaining in those last 2 outings. Now it seems like that progress has basically gone backwards, and we're going to have to wait, a couple more weeks to see him get back to where he was.
It's a major bummer. You nailed it. The turnaround over the last week and a half is due to the fact that they're not yucking up games in the ninth inning. And before Edwin Diaz went on the injured list, he was a major part of that. We saw in his absence, the Mets couldn't find anybody, quite frankly, to go and close in the ninth inning. And listen, Nikki, I don't really care about this sticky stuff. I said it with Scherzer last year. I said it with Cole a couple of years ago. It to me is a whole lot to do about nothing, but there are rules in place, right? So my feeling is don't get caught. So I don't know what to tell the Met fan. I feel bad that you're not going to have Edwin Diaz for the next 10 games. I think it might cost the Mets a game or two where they don't have their closer in a one-run game against maybe the heart of a particular team's batting order and whatnot. But there's really no way to fight it. It is what it is. It stinks. Got to find a way to buck up and fight through it over the next 10 days. That's that.
Jolly, do you think that with Clark Schmidt and Scherzer having the chance last year to wash their hands when they had the sticky stuff on, do you think it's anything against the Mets that they haven't got that treatment, or do you just think there was too much on his hands that they just didn't want to give him a chance?
I think it's most likely the latter. Maybe they just thought it was too far gone and it warranted that ejection and suspension. But all I ask for is consistency in these incidents. We haven't really seen that. There's been varying circumstances, varying levels of sticky, if you want to say, on each pitcher's hand. But if some pitchers are afforded an opportunity to clean themselves up and finish the game and not get suspended, I think it should be stretched to every pitcher. Or if you want to go conversely, if you find anything, you're ejected immediately, no second chances. Have that uniform across the board. I think a big problem with this entire situation, not only for the Mets and Edwin Diaz, but for any instance where this has happened, is the ambiguity of the ruling. Because if it's not sweat and rosin, what is it? We still don't know. We probably will never find out.
A lot of frustration. A lot of frustration, Niki, from Met fans saying, are they out to get us? Is it only the Mets that are the ones that are violating this sticky stuff nonsense? My feeling is this. Don't get caught. I mean, literally, don't get caught. It's like if you can find a way to stay under the radar and have a little extra substance on your hands, more power to you. But you got to find a way to stay under that radar. And, yeah, I would have preferred Diaz had the opportunity to go and wash his hands. Probably still would have gotten this suspension and probably still would have gotten thrown out of the game. But if he was given that opportunity, at least we wouldn't be talking about it.
Yeah, it's also very subjective. Like you see the pictures and you're like, it looks like it's a lot, but it's also hot. So one of those things that's subjective. But let's talk about last off day. The Mets flew from Texas to Chicago on the team's last off day. For both of you, would you rather spend 3 days in Chicago or 3 days in Dallas? I've never been to Chicago, so maybe someone sell me on it.
Oh, my God, Niki, it's not even close. Chicago. Now, full disclosure, I've not been to Arlington. I might be going down for the All-Star game in a couple of weeks, but I know it's going to be 10 zillion degrees in Arlington, Texas. And if you're in Chi-Town come summertime, you got the lake, you got all the happenings, there's so much to do. I'm dying to get back to Chicago. I've actually never been – I've been to Chicago. I've never been to Wrigley Field. I'm going to try to correct that in September when the Yankees go right before the start of the football season. But – Jolly, this is a no-brainer for me. Chicago, landslide.
Oh, yeah. I mean, even with a little bit of my youth shown, I've only been to Chicago once, never to Texas. It's Chicago for me, between Wrigley Field, between Chicago-style pizza, which I'll defend to the grave, and then the bean itself. You know, there's a ton to do in Chicago, and I'll be seeing Texas for the first time at this year's All-Star game, but I'm a little worried about that heat because I don't do so well in the summer heat.
Trust me, I lived in Texas for 3 years, and especially Arlington, there's not much to do there, and it's so hot that it's like, I think New York is hot right now. Go to Texas, and then I don't know how I actually survived. So let me know how the All-Star game is and how hot it really is. But let's look ahead. Mets are set to face the Yankees 2-game series at Citi Field. The Yankees, despite being one of the top teams in baseball, have been struggling recently, 3-7 in their last 10 games. JJ, should Yankee fans be worried about this recent performance now, especially without Stanton?
So I wouldn't be worried about the Yankees losing a couple of series, Niki. It was going to happen. You play 162 games, and I'm not even getting nuts about them not playing well against the Dodgers, the Orioles, and the Atlanta Braves. They'll have plenty of opportunities to beat good teams, and I've seen the Yankees in the regular season beat good teams. That's great. They got to do it in the postseason. That's something they haven't done in a long, long time. Now, am I concerned about some of the warts on this particular team that have been kind of exposed here over the last few weeks? Yeah, most certainly. I think this lineup is entirely too top heavy, and it's going to be that much more problematic with Giancarlo Stanton out, who's played really well for the Yankees this year and has kind of rounded out that lineup. Now you're going to be without his power for the next couple weeks. They're getting nothing out of third base. Now you got to play Trent Grisham every day. DJ LeMahieu looks like a corpse. So that's problematic. Bullpen needs another arm or two that's going to give you some swing and miss stuff. I think they're short there. And alarming back-to-back starts from Carlos Rodon and an interesting start for Luis Hill coming up. Yankees are going to be in the playoffs. I don't even care if they win the division. They need to figure out a way to make their team whole and right for the games that matter the most. I know that's going to come across as a very spoiled way of looking at it when your team's a zillion games over 500. But that's the predicament the Yankees are in. They're not good enough right now. How do they get good enough between now and October?
Yeah, and it's just hopefully Giancarlo Stanton's back when they said he is, because it was only a matter of time that he would be an injury. Jolly, which team needs more of a win right now, the Yankees or the Mets?
This may shock you coming from a Mets fan, but I actually do think it's the Yankees. They're so far above 500. Like John said, they're going to the playoffs this year, barring a complete disaster. But right now, with the loss of Giancarlo Stanton and how much it hurts to see what would have been Jason Dominguez's spot come had he not gotten injured as well, they're reeling a little bit. They just had a 10-game stretch against 3 really good teams, and they failed in that stretch. And they need to pick up their momentum back. The starting rotation, which looked bulletproof, has faltered greatly. Like he said, DJ LeMahieu has not looked great since returning from injury. And for the Mets, they have a very favorable stretch of games coming up after this Subway Series between Houston, the Nationals, Pirates, Colorado Rockies, a lot of beatable teams. They've gotten past their tough stretch in June with flying colors. And we said it a little bit before the show. We can have this discussion, but every year when it's a 2-game series with the Mets and Yankees, it's the most obvious split of all time. And that's my prediction going into this one.
Well, speaking of this Subway Series, let's play a little game called To the Dark Side. So like I said, next 2 days, Subway Series, we're going to go back and forth and see who can name more players that played for both the Yankees and the Mets. So JJ, you'll go, then Jolly will go back and forth until someone can't name someone. So JJ, you go first.
Wow, we might be doing this for a long time, Niki.
Well, then I'll cut you off.
Memory, and I got a pretty good memory. All right, I'll start right out of the gate. Mike Stanton.
Okay. Oh, the reliever. I was like, Giancarlo never played.
No,
for
Mike
the
Stanton.
Mets.
Throwing it back, Jolly.
I'll throw it back too. I'll go with Darryl Strawberry as my first.
Great one. All right, I'll count it out with Doc Gooden.
Let me take Carlos Beltran.
Al Leiter.
John Olrud.
Great choice. Great choice. David Cohn.
Okay, you went pitcher, so let me try and go pitcher. I will say Armando Benitez.
That's a great one because both fan bases couldn't stand him. Curtis Granderson.
Oh, love him.
Granderson was my next one. I'll go my first current Yankee. I'll take Marcus Stroman.
Marcus Stroman, nice. Jay Bruce.
Oh my God, I forgot.
That's right, he was a Yankee. That's right.
You may have me tapped out here a little bit. I got to tip my cap a little bit there.
I feel like I'm back on Baseball Night in New York where I'm like going through, did I say this name? Can I keep a running sheet? I literally could do this all day though, Niki. That's disturbing, but it's true.
You're done? What about Luis Severino?
True.
Severino, Harrison Bader.
Yeah, like we got some on the current roster. Okay, so JJ wins this one. Amazing. JJ, congrats. I think we could have went the whole show with you just listing people. So,
I know. I would have probably repeated somebody at some point. This is like a fun exercise if I'm bored later today, Niki. I'll think about it, Jolly.
List. All right, let's go to Subway Snoozer. So again, talking about the Subway Series, it's in the middle of the week, Tuesday and Wednesday. Not exactly prime time for fan attendance, but like you said, Jolly, earlier, the stadiums will fill out. JJ, does the Subway Series carry any extra importance as a New York fan, or do you think that there's better rivalries for the Yankees and the Mets in their own divisions?
Yeah, I mean, listen, you've only had the Yankees play the Mets in the World Series once in 2000. There's always going to be this sense of citywide, statewide, region-wide, like Yankee-Met divide within households, within marriages, neighbors. The idea that you could go into work if your team plays well the next day and talk all sorts of crap. Like, I think that, to me, more than anything, is what makes the Subway Series great. I think for the two particular teams, there's not much of a rivalry at all. I mean, Aaron Boone and Carlos Mendoza, buddy from their time they spent together. I mean, before that, you had Buck Showalter, who was doing Yankee games. So, it feels like the Mets have a bunch of Yankees. The Yankees have a Met or two. So, like, that dynamic, like, there's not going to be the hatred with the way the season series is set up where you're playing 4 times a year between the Yankees and the Mets. Jolly, the only thing I can think of, well, obviously Clemens and Piazza from a long, long time ago, but you had Stanton and Lindor a few years ago chirping on that Sunday night game. Like, that's like the peak of, like, saltiness between the Yankees and the Mets. Like, it's not Phillies Mets, it's not Yankees Astros or Yankees or Red Sox or even Rays for that matter. It's fun for the fans, for the players. I think, it's a fun atmosphere, and that's what it is.
Jolly, do you think that it's on Major League Baseball or the teams to make it more of like a big thing, more of a rivalry, or is it just it is what it is? These aren't two teams that have bad blood.
Yeah, I mean, John brought up the 3-homer game for Lindor. That weekend, the Mets were out of it. The Yankees were in this weird funk in 2021 in general, and it was a weekend series. It was the 9/11 game. It was the Sunday Night Baseball game, and MLB did a really good job of making that series feel like it was something much more than it was. And for it to be this Tuesday, Wednesday stretch where we all kind of feel like one team's going to win one and lose one, it kind of dilutes the fun of a crosstown rivalry. Now, I do agree that I don't really think the rivalry is there. I think even fans kind of play it down a little bit until we're actually in the game and then you really want to win it. But yeah, I think there's a lot that can be done here. I mean, I really enjoyed the broadcast last night between the Mets and the Cubs. That could have easily been the Mets and the Yankees on Sunday night primetime baseball. And instead, you might get a couple sellouts on some weekday games, which is a win for maybe Mets ownership. But at the end of the day, I think it kind of dilutes the entire experience for the fans.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if there are more Mets fans or Yankee fans at Citi Field. So let's talk about the Subway Series in the past. So Jolly, as a Mets fan, what are your top memories from the Subway Series, either growing up or recent years, that sticks out to you when you think about it?
Well, John took the Lindor 3-homer game from me. I was actually at that game, so it has a special place in my heart for sure. The walk-off off Mariano Rivera, I believe it was 2014, where the Mets kind of pulled one out from their hat. I was also at that game. And then this one's a little bit weird. I believe his name is Dae-Sung Koo.
Yes.
A reliever for the Mets. I was much, much younger at this point, but that hit off Randy Johnson where Joe Buck, says this is the most give up at bat of the entire season, right into the hit. Is a very cool moment as well.
Well, unfortunately, Joey, I was at that game, the Dae-Sung Koo game, but thankfully I was at as well, and I'm showing my age a little bit here, but that's okay. That's what I do around here. The Luis Castillo.
Oh, that's my top one also.
Yeah, I wasn't going to bring it up, actually.
Well, I had to do it. I mean, being there, and I can tell you guys, my reaction was quite similar to Alex Rodriguez. Instead, I slammed the bleacher. It was like a big spot. You're thinking you're going to lose the game. I might have used some language that I'm not going to use now on Met Off Day. I'm going to try to be on good behavior. And then it was just like, holy blank, he dropped it. And then you see Teixeira sprinting around third. I'm like, the Yankees just won a game? I go, what is happening here? So it doesn't get more outrageous than that. Koo is close, but it doesn't get more outrageous than that.
Yeah, that was, I'll literally never forget that. Also, I was a huge A-Rod fan, so that was just like a great moment. That's when I feel like the Yankees-Mets rivalry to me felt like it was a huge thing. Now, as I've gotten older, I agree. It's like, I don't think it's that big of a deal, but definitely a top memory for me too. Well, now we're going to let this rivalry brew a little more with some Yankees-Mets debates, speed round, and don't just go with your teams here. Be honest. So, better stadiums, Citi Field or Yankee Stadium, Jolly?
I'm going to go with Citi Field. I'm a little biased.
But if you're non-biased.
If I was unbiased, I would still go with Citi Field. The one reason is because I think old Yankee Stadium should have never been torn down. I think it's a historical landmark. And the new stadium has always felt a little, I don't know, it just hasn't felt right to me. Citi Field versus Shea. Shea was a little bit of a rundown place at the end there. So I would go with Citi Field.
All right, I'm giving you guys a cop-out answer. I'm with you 1,000%, Jolly. It still makes me sick to my stomach that the old Yankee Stadium is not there, considering I grew up going to games there and always have a place near and dear to my heart. But the outside ambiance, no disrespect to the auto lots. I know Steve Cohen's trying to do something about that. Casino, bars, maybe we'll have a different conversation in about 5 years. But the extracurriculars before a game, I'm going to enjoy myself in the Bronx a heck of a lot more. But, Nikki, as far as being in the ballpark, you know what team I root for. I'll call it like I see it. Citi Field's a better place to watch a game.
Okay. Didn't think I'd hear you say it, but I agree with the outside ambiance. Yankee Stadium definitely takes that. JJ, back to you. Which team has better jerseys?
Oh, I got to go with the classic Yankee jerseys. And I love the Met jerseys. Don't get me wrong. I do. But there's just something iconic about the pinstripes, you know? Like, when you think about, like, iconic uniforms in sports, you know, they're in the top 5 list. The Mets have great uniforms. This is where my bias is definitely showing. I understand that. But it's got to be Yankee pinstripes.
Jolly.
I'll lean with you, man. I think simplicity is king, and the Yankees have iconic uniforms. The Mets, I think, have done themselves a little bit of a disservice this year by taking away the white outline on their black uniforms, rotating so many different uniforms in. Sometimes consistency is king, and it's hard to argue that the Yankees have been, the most iconic uniforms in baseball.
I honestly love the Mets City Connects, though. I think out of all the City Connects, they did a really good job.
Wow, you like them?
I do too.
I like
I'm
them.
out on them. You guys can enjoy them. Give me the black old school Met jerseys.
I like them.
What happened to those, like the peach ones or the off white ones that they used to wear? Those are gone, right? They don't wear those anymore.
Are by the wayside, I think.
I like those. I, mean,
I like
I don't run Fanatics. What can I say? They don't.
But I don't think the Yankees need to get City Connects. Now thinking about the team as a whole, Jolly, which team do you think has a better long-term outlook, Stearns' team or Cashman's team?
Well, I mean, that's a good question. A lot of this does come down to Juan Soto, which is a conversation I think we're all going to be having for, the next 360
we're about to have it.
Yeah, exactly. In terms of the Mets' long-term outlook, I think they got a great man in charge, a man who has worked with much smaller payrolls in the past and has a chance to do a lot more. It's hard to argue against Brian Cashman. He's been in the same role for 25 years, and he's been the best at that role pretty much the entire run of the way. So in terms of long-term outlook, I would say the Yankees right now. They're in a great spot right now. They have a ton of players under control, and if they do keep Juan Soto, it's hard to argue them falling off anytime soon.
Yeah,
I'm all about stars, guys. And right now, I'm just more confident in the Yankee stars than the Met stars. I mean, you got Aaron Judge, you have Garrett Cole, and I think when it's all said and done, the Yankees are going to have Juan Soto in their grasp. I can't imagine the Yankees let Juan Soto go to the Mets or anywhere else because I don't think Hal Steinbrenner wants to deal with that problem in the offseason. So, I bet on stars. And I know the Yankees haven't won since 2009, but, I mean, we're talking about three of the premier players in all baseball. I'd want them on my team.
So, JJ, you think Soto's staying in the Bronx? Jolly,
I do. Hefty paycheck, but yes, Niki, I do.
I'm down. I'll give some of my paycheck to him.
You can. I'll pass. I think Hal can afford it. He'll be okay.
Thanks. Jolly, do you think he stays in the Bronx?
It's hard to imagine a reality where he doesn't. Even as a Mets fan, with us maybe being the best competitor to go get him, it's not really how David Stearns has ever operated. I know that the Mets want to bring in star-level talent, but there is some sort of caveat you take on when you're paying one player what might be $50 million a year. And at the same time, it kind of just looks like Juan Soto is falling in love with the pinstripes. Obviously, if I'm a Mets fan and Juan Soto comes here, I'm not going to be upset by any means necessary. But it's going to be a vicious bidding war, and who knows, it might not even be a New York team.
Let's not manifest that. I'm thinking he stays in the Bronx. But back to the Mets, let's talk Iglesias versus McNeil. The Mets say Jeff McNeil is the team's starting second baseman, but Jose Iglesias continues to be dominant on offense, while McNeil seems to struggle on offense, which we all know. So, JJ, do you think it's time Jose Iglesias is named the starting second baseman for good?
Well, I don't think Mendoza and the Mets are going to do that with the amount of money they're paying Jeff McNeil, but it's to a point, like you just alluded to, Niki, where I would prefer to see Iglesias out there. He's given the Mets more of a spark. As the Mets have gotten going offensively, you look up and down the batting order and guys are contributing. Jeff McNeil has not. So I think the Mets are in a weird situation where it's like, well, we extended McNeil, we gave him this contract after he won the batting title, and he's just not performing. I'm not going to be surprised if they cut their losses, Jolly, come the trade deadline, where they just say, look, this is not working out. We have Steve Cohen's wherewithal. We can cut this, and maybe it's Iglesias, maybe it's Acuna down the road, whoever it might be. But I think Jeff McNeil, ultimately, his days as a Met, despite the contract, I think are going to be coming to an end sooner than you think.
Yeah. Jolly, do you think that he can turn his season around, or do you think it's cooked?
It's tough to say. I mean, this is easily the worst he's ever looked, and John brought up the paycheck, and it's hard to ignore that kind of thing when you're filling out the lineup every day, but the Mets are in a position where they kind of need every game. They burned way too many losses in May. They need to put out their best roster right now, and right now that roster includes Jose Iglesias, who's doing it on both sides of the ball. For McNeil, I think he profiles as a great bench player. He can play corner outfield spots. He can play second and third. I don't know that mentally he's ready to accept that as his role, being a starting player for so many years, being a former batting champion. So I agree. I think that the best case scenario here is a severance of ties. Maybe a new environment helps McNeil fix his game, but I don't see him turning things around in New York this year.
Yeah, and I think Mets fans would rather Iglesias at this point too. Let's talk about Mets starting pitcher Jose Quintana. Luis Severino had some of their best starts this season against the Cubs, but Tylor MeGill struggled, allowing 6 runs in 3 innings. JJ, how impressed were you with Quintana and Severino in this series?
Very impressed. I'm going to say I was more impressed, believe it or not, with Quintana because Severino has been doing it all year. Quintana got off to a rotten start, and this is a guy who's been reliable and has been somebody that, for the most part, you can count on every 5th day to give you innings and give you professionalism. And I thought that was a big start to the series. Now, it helps when the Mets go and score a zillion runs against Imanaga, where you can just go, be relaxed, throw strikes, and kind of take it from there. But I think Quintana becoming more of a stabilizing presence in this rotation changes the look and feel of this team. With Severino, he's been doing it all year. Biggest key, Niki, he's got to stay on the mound. He's got to continue to take the ball every 5th day. And I think when we're talking about all-stars in a couple of weeks, Luis Severino, who was banished from the Bronx and had like a 7 ERA last year, I think he should be going to the All-Star game for the New York Mets. I really do.
Yeah, you have to be happy for Luis Severino, too, after the season he had last year. Jolly, what would you want McGill's role to be when Senga comes back or Christian Scott comes back up from the minors?
You know, it's tough to say because we've tried him in the bullpen and it hasn't really worked in the past, but I do think that is the best course of action because Tylor MeGill is in some sort of quadruple A limbo right now. He's better than a triple A pitcher, but he's not quite an MLB starting pitcher, and the Mets have options between Christian Scott, between Jose Budo, hopefully Kodai Senga when he's healthy as well. The best course of action is some sort of long relief role or maybe playing a role in some sort of trade the Mets can maneuver, but right now, it doesn't look like Tylor MeGill is going to be part of the long-term rotation plans going towards the season.
Yeah, the Mets also need all their wins, so having someone in the rotation that's not performing well definitely doesn't benefit the Mets. Well, now we are going to switch it up and bring in our king of social media at SNY, Matt Splenley, for our social media moment of the week.
Thanks,
Hello,
Niki.
Matt.
Appreciate it. How's everybody doing today? You guys all look fantastic.
Loving the stash. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Thanks, JJ. I appreciate you. We should have linked up before. We could have both got the stash going just for the show.
I
You can save it after.
Yours was better than mine, though. That's okay.
All right, so I want to talk Francisco Lindor a little bit because Steve Cohen
right.
during the game last night posted on X/Twitter, the joy that Lindor plays with is fun to watch. Obviously, another nice game, especially defensively last night for Lindor. He's been on a great stretch. Just a couple numbers. 4th in the NL and F4 since May 1st. He's 7th overall in the National League after such a tough start. He leads all National League shortstops in outs above average, 885 OPS in the leadoff position. So he's been great for the Mets. So, Jolly, just what has been so different about Lindor and the feel since he got into the leadoff spot in the lineup and just started to lead the Mets?
You know, I think it's a tough pill to swallow for some Mets fans, but Francisco Lindor is a slow starter. He always has been a slow starter, and will probably continue to be a slow starter. But I think the move to the leadoff spot, like you alluded to, has been the biggest change. And credit to Carlos Mendoza for tinkering with this lineup that has been mostly the same for 2 years just to get his star players going. Brandon Nimmo moving to second also helped him a ton as well. For Lindor, I think it was a necessary confidence boost, and to have his guys behind him also carrying the load and making sure that he's not this one-star player trying to carry an entire lineup, it's allowed him to play his role. He's playing great defense, he's stealing bases, he's making contact, he's not striking out, and I think a big reason for that is being the first man up at the start of every single game.
JJ, for you, who is the guy in the lineup that makes the Mets lineup go? Because I feel like, with Lindor's playing well, obviously, that a lot of the guys have played well. I mean, I think JD Martinez has felt like that guy to me for the last couple of weeks. But who do you think is that one guy that is the linchpin of the entire lineup that feels like when the Mets are going?
It's a great question. I mean, you can make a compelling case for Lindor. You can make a compelling case for Brandon Nimmo, who has got going over the last few weeks. But you hit on Martinez. To me, him being able to anchor that middle of the order has been paramount because now you're getting power, you're getting slugging, you're taking some of the pressure off a guy like Pete Alonso. And Martinez has been the ultimate professional hitter. He's been exactly the guy he's been in Detroit and Boston and last year with the Los Angeles Dodgers. And I think him really getting apart and being a big anchor in that 3 spot. Look at that OPS right there at 870. My goodness. I mean, 9 home runs, doing exactly what he's done on the back of the baseball card. Yes, those 2 guys, they were part of it last year. I think Martinez has changed this lineup, at least the way I see it.
Watching him for a few years, lived with a Red Sox fan for a couple years. So I watched a ton of him with Boston. It's a treat to watch him every day. I'll tell you what, and his importance in the lineup has been key. So I agree. We ended up on JD after giving Lindor love initially, but we got them both. So, all right, Niki, back to you. All you guys.
Thank you, Matt, for joining us. Well, the Mets are officially 2 games under 500, which they've come a long way, and they are only 1 game back of the wild card. So they won the tiebreaker against the Cubs. Jolly, are you starting to believe that the Mets have a postseason chance, which is crazy to say with how the season started?
I mean, Niki, you're talking to an absolutely delusional Mets fan. When they swept the Nationals a few weeks ago, I said, oh, we're all the way back. We're going to the World Series, all that. But no, I truly do believe that this team can make a push for the wild card. It is a matter of what does the front office value? Do they value a wild card spot this year or the continued success going forward of the team? Because the Mets do have a ton of sellable pieces for this year's trade deadline, like a lot of the teams in front of them and behind them. But if they continue to win in June and July, especially with a softer stretch in their schedule coming up, it's hard to argue that they would sell. I think they keep the team together, and I think they can really compete with any of those teams at the top, including the Atlanta Braves.
JJ, when you look at that,
Mets are going to be in the mix for the playoffs, guys. They're going to be in the mix. First of all, if you heard Cohen a couple of weeks ago, even when things were not going well, it was a much different tone than what it was last year when the Mets were scuffling, where he seemed far more willing and far more receptive to be in that seller's position. The Mets were in an awful spot in May, and he's like, it's early. We think we're a playoff team. We think we're going to get back in this thing. And the Mets have gotten back in this thing. I think they're in it this year. Now, are they on the level of Philly, the Dodgers, the Atlanta Braves? Not the way I see it. But when I look at the rest of the wild card picture, Mets got a lot of positives going, especially when they have Edwin Diaz back in that bullpen. If they can ever get Kodai Senga back within the rotation, I think this is a year where they're not going to be crazy buyers, but I think they're going to look at this group and say, all right, boys, let's try and get ourselves into the postseason and have a lot more fun this summer than we would have anticipated after the first month of the year when things were as rotten as can be.
Yeah, they need to just stay right around 500. Can't go on a bad stretch, but they're on the right path. The Grimace era is going well for the Mets. So, as it is the Mets off day, we're going to wrap up this episode of Mets Off Day Live. How do you guys plan to spend the rest of your off day? Or are you guys even off today? What's the vibe looking like?
I'm taking a nice, comfy work from home day. Probably going to write a little bit and just, count the minutes and hours before Mets baseball's back.
Amazing. Well, JJ already is taking his off.
He took off.
With that being said, we are going to wrap it up. Thank you guys so much for watching Mets Off Day Live presented by Planet Fitness. Join Planet Fitness for $1 down, $24.99 a month. Deal ends June 27th. For JJ, wherever he is, Jolly Olive, I'm Niki Lattarulo. Thanks for watching and enjoy your off day.